The Galactic Academy of Interdimensional Studies stood as a beacon for the universe's most brilliant minds. From the ethereal beings of the Helix Nebula to the crystalline intellects of HFY, the Academy represented a melting pot of perspectives, each contributing to the understanding of existence itself. Yet, among this assembly of genius, one species frequently drew derision: humans. Humanity, recent arrivals on the galactic stage, had earned a place at the Academy through sheer innovation. Still, to many advanced civilizations, humans were a curiosity, chaotic, impulsive, and dismissed as an evolutionary oddity that had stumbled its way into technological competence. This disdain hung heavy as Laura Brown, a young human exchange student, stepped into her first interdimensional physics class. Laura had been overjoyed when she was accepted into the Academy. She envisioned herself learning from the finest minds in the galaxy, engaging with alien cultures, and proving humanity's worth. But the reality had been sobering. From her first day, she faced condescension and skepticism. Her classmates, descendants of civilizations with millennia of advancement, rarely included her. Professors often seemed to disregard her entirely, as if her presence was more a novelty than a contribution. Today, the tension in the amphitheater was palpable. Professor Zarek, an imposing and Roman with a shimmering, glass-like body, had introduced the hyperspace paradox, a theoretical challenge so daunting that even the most seasoned academics struggled with it. The massive lecture hall, its floating platforms buzzing with students, brimmed with anticipation as equations hovered in the air, glowing faintly. "Let us explore the mechanics of a collapsing multidimensional wormhole." Zarek's voice boomed, deep and resonant. "Who will be the first to propose a solution?" The room fell into a heavy silence before Siler, the class's star student, rose to his feet. And in Roman like the professor, Siler's translucent form glowed faintly with an air of confidence born from repeated success. Known for his sharp mind and biting wit, he commanded attention effortlessly. "Professor," he began smoothly, his voice brimming with self-assurance, "it would be my pleasure to attempt this challenge." He paused, his glowing eyes sweeping the room before fixing on Laura. A faint smirk appeared as his tone shifted, "Though perhaps our human classmate should go first. I'm curious to see how Earth's perspective compares to and Roman reasoning." Snickers echoed across the hall, the low hum of mockery unmistakable. Laura felt the heat rise to her face as every eye turned to her. She had endured plenty of jokes since arriving, but this one cut deeper than the rest. This was a direct challenge, public and impossible to ignore without reinforcing every assumption about human inferiority. Laura inhaled deeply, steadying herself before rising to her feet. "I'll give it a try," she said, her voice firm despite the quickened rhythm of her heartbeat. All eyes tracked her as she stepped onto the central platform where the equations hovered, luminous and intricate. Professor Zarek arched a translucent brow but remained silent, motioning for her to proceed. The problem loomed before her, a labyrinth of variables and interdimensional principles that seemed to mock conventional reasoning. Laura's mind raced as she stared at the equations. She wasn't unfamiliar with complex problems, but this was far beyond anything she had tackled. Still, she recalled her Earth mentor's advice. Physics isn't just formulas. It's about understanding the rules and knowing when to bend them. Gripping the stylus, Laura hesitated briefly, then began writing. Her movements were cautious at first, but her confidence grew as she focused entirely on the task, tuning out the murmurs around her. Instead of diving headfirst into the multidimensional chaos, she started with a Newtonian analogy, simple and familiar. The reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled through the amphitheater, followed by faint laughter. "Childish," someone whispered. "Typical human thinking," another snickered. Laura ignored them, her attention locked on the equations. She wasn't trying to impress, she was trying to make sense of the problem. Breaking it into manageable pieces, she applied concepts of energy conservation, spatial geometry, and time dilation, steadily weaving together her interpretation of the solution. Bit by bit, she layered her insights, bridging her Earth-based understanding with the alien framework before her. When she finally stepped back, the murmurs had faded into silence. The room buzzed faintly with the hum of the holographic displays. Laura's heart pounded as she surveyed her work, unsure if it was right but certain she had done her best. Siler's slow clap broke the silence, the sound deliberate and mocking. "Impressive," he said with a smirk, his tone dripping with condescension. "Allow me to demonstrate how it's truly done." Without waiting, he brushed past Laura and took the platform, his movements smooth and practiced. Siler's stylus danced across the holograms as he worked with dazzling precision, employing advanced and Roman techniques that left Laura struggling to keep up. He manipulated hyperdimensional calculus and exotic particle theory with ease, his equations flowing seamlessly into a complex yet elegant solution. When he finished, Siler turned to the audience, glowing faintly with triumph. There, he declared, his voice confident. A proper resolution. No further attempts should be necessary. The class erupted into applause as Siler inclined his head slightly, his gaze lingering on Laura with a smirk that seemed to say, "Better luck next time, human." But then Professor Zarek spoke, his tone calm and deliberate. "Fascinating," he began, his eyes gleaming faintly. "Both solutions are notable. Miss Brown's approach, while unconventional, demonstrates clear logic and creativity, though it lacks certain advanced refinements. Mr. Siler's method, as expected, is elegant. However, there is a flaw. Small but critical." The applause died instantly. Siler blinked, his glow dimming as murmurs of confusion rippled through the room. "A flaw?" Siler repeated, his tone incredulous. "That's impossible." Professor Zarek gestured toward the holographic equations. "Your assumptions regarding temporal flux interactions overlook the cascade effects in lower dimensional layers. Miss Brown's solution, while more basic, accounts for this phenomenon and aligns more accurately with experimental observations." A wave of murmurs swept through the room, the tone shifting dramatically. Siler's luminous form flickered slightly as he stared at the projection, his confidence visibly shaken. Standing at the edge of the platform, Laura felt a spark of hope ignite within her. "Miss Brown," Zarek said, turning his attention to her, "your approach is unconventional but demonstrates a commendable ability to think laterally. I look forward to seeing how you refine it in future discussions." Laura nodded, still processing his words. As she returned to her seat, she felt Siler's gaze fixed on her, brimming with silent resentment. The dynamic in the lecture hall had shifted. For the first time, humanity had made a meaningful impression within the prestigious Galactic Academy. The tension lingered thickly in the air as students began filing out, their hushed conversations brimming with speculation. Laura remained seated, reviewing the holographic display of her work. The low hum of voices receded into the background as her thoughts drifted. Standing up to Siler, the Academy's golden student, had been a gamble. While Zarek's recognition filled her with a quiet pride, she understood the implications of her actions. Victory at the Academy came at a cost. Competition was relentless, and each achievement was dissected under the glaring scrutiny of her peers. She had demonstrated humanity's potential, but knew she had also painted a target on herself. Later, as Laura wandered through the Academy's sprawling campus, her mind remained restless. The alien architecture was breathtaking, with floating structures whose surfaces shimmered like quicksilver. Pathways twisted and spiraled in defiance of Euclidean logic, a testament to the advanced understanding of space and physics that define this place. Yet even amidst such wonders, Laura felt the familiar weight of loneliness pressing on her. She arrived at the central library, an imposing structure that seemed to shift and shimmer with every step closer. Its translucent walls revealed endless shelves of glowing data tablets and floating spheres of archived knowledge. Inside, a faint hum permeated the air, the sound of constant information exchange managed by the library's advanced AI. The library was one of the few places Laura found peace, a sanctuary away from the judgmental eyes of her classmates. She made her way to a secluded corner and settled in, ready to lose herself in her studies. Just as she began to focus, her holotab vibrated softly, pulling her attention back to reality. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from Dr. Renfield, her mentor on Earth. "Heard about your run-in with Siler. Not bad, kid, but don't let it go to your head. Physics isn't about being the smartest. It's about seeing the universe as it really is." A faint smile tugged at Laura's lips. Dr. Renfield always had a way of putting things into perspective. She quickly typed a light-hearted reply before turning her focus back to her notes. If she wanted to survive, let alone thrive, at the Academy, holding her ground wouldn't be enough. She had to rise above. Hours slipped by as Laura immersed herself in hyperspace theories, analyzing and Roman methods and contrasting them with human approaches. What stood out most was the alien tendency to embrace complexity. The Roman excelled at crafting intricate models that accounted for countless variables, but Laura saw this as a double-edged sword. Complexity often obscured simplicity, and humans, with their so-called primitive methods, had a knack for cutting through the noise to find direct solutions. Her concentration was broken by a shadow falling across her desk. She looked up to see Siler standing there, his translucent form faintly glowing. His expression was hard to read, but his posture radiated tension. "May I join you?" he asked, his tone neutral but carrying an undercurrent Laura couldn't quite place. She hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead." Siler slid into the seat across from her, his glowing eyes fixed on the equations hovering between them. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "I've been looking over your solution," Siler said at last. "It's unconventional Unconventional, Laura raised an eyebrow. Is that your polite way of saying I got lucky? His glow flickered faintly, an Roman gesture of irritation. Luck had nothing to do with it. Your approach was unorthodox. It's rare to see someone think so far outside the established framework. That's one way to put it, Laura replied, leaning back. She studied his face, trying to read his intentions. So why are you here? To critique my work? Or to prove you're still the smartest in the room? For a moment, Siler's glow dimmed, and Laura caught a flicker of something unexpected, uncertainty. Neither, he said quietly. I came to understand it. Your solution, while flawed in parts, revealed an angle I hadn't considered. It highlighted a simplicity I overlooked. Laura blinked, momentarily taken aback. This wasn't the smug Siler she was used to. He wasn't here to gloat, he was curious. Beneath his arrogance was a genuine hunger for knowledge, a quality she couldn't help but respect. Well, she said, gesturing to the floating equations, I can walk you through it if you're willing to listen. For the next hour, they dove into the intricacies of hyperspace mechanics. Siler's method was meticulous, his calculations precise and exhaustive. Laura, by contrast, focused on distilling the problem to its essence, simplifying the chaos into manageable components. Their discussion became a collision of perspectives, each pushing the other to rethink their assumptions. Their approaches couldn't have been more different, but as their discussion unfolded, both began to recognize the strengths in the other's perspective. By the time they wrapped up, Laura felt an unexpected sense of camaraderie with Siler. Though still rivals, there was now a mutual respect between them that hadn't existed before. As Siler stood to leave, he paused, glancing back at her. You're not what I expected, human, he said, his tone softer, almost thoughtful. Perhaps there's more to your species than I gave it credit for. Laura allowed herself a small smile. And maybe there's more to an Roman than arrogance and glowing egos. Siler's glow flickered, and an Roman gesture Laura suspected might be their version of a laugh. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Laura alone with her thoughts. She returned to her notes, a spark of determination flaring in her chest. This wasn't just a personal victory, it was the beginning of a journey to prove humanity's place in the galaxy. What Laura didn't realize was that her encounter with Siler had already sent ripples through the Academy. Those ripples would soon grow into waves, challenging not only the assumptions of her peers, but also the very foundations of galactic science. The following week, the Galactic Academy was abuzz with chatter. Laura Brown had become a topic of heated discussion, her confrontation with Siler spreading like wildfire through the corridors. Some spoke in admiration of her daring, others dismissed her success as a lucky break for an unsophisticated species. Regardless of opinion, one thing was clear: Laura was no longer invisible. Laura, however, had little time to dwell on her newfound attention. Siler, in true competitive spirit, had issued a formal rematch. This time, the challenge would take place in the Academy's holographic simulation chamber, a space designed to test not just theoretical knowledge but practical skill. The simulation chamber was a marvel of advanced engineering, its domed interior capable of creating hyper-realistic holograms. Participants could interact with fully immersive environments, manipulate variables, and simulate complex phenomena. For this challenge, Siler had chosen a task that demanded mastery of both theory and execution, designing a stable hyperspace route through a simulated wormhole. The task was daunting. Success required balancing countless variables: energy efficiency, temporal stability, spatial distortions, all while adapting to the erratic nature of the wormhole itself. Laura spent every spare moment in the library, buried in research and running endless mental simulations. She knew Siler would come armed with the full power of an Roman precision and advanced techniques. Her approach, rooted in humanity's intuitive and practical style, would need to be flawless to stand a chance. She was determined to show that simplicity and creativity could rival even the galaxy's most complex systems. On the day of the challenge, the simulation chamber buzzed with anticipation. Students from every corner of the Academy crowded the viewing platforms, eager to witness the high-stakes competition. For many, this was more than a rivalry. It was a clash of ideologies, a test of whether humanity's unconventional methods could hold their own against millennia of alien sophistication. Even a few professors had joined the crowd, their holographic avatars hovering above the spectators, adding to the charged atmosphere. The anticipation in the room was electric. Laura stood at her station on one side of the chamber, her heart pounding as she stared at the swirling wormhole projected before her. It was both mesmerizing and menacing, a vortex of shifting light and shadow that pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm. Opposite her, Siler stood poised, his translucent figure glowing with unshakable confidence. He gave her a faint nod, his expression unreadable. Participants, the chamber AI announced in its smooth, mechanical tone, tone, "The parameters for this simulation have been randomized. Your objective, create the most efficient and stable hyperspace route through the wormhole. You have 1 hour. Begin." The room fell into silence as the countdown timer appeared. Laura immediately set to work, her fingers flying across the holographic console in front of her. Streams of data flooded the display, a chaotic mess of variables detailing the wormhole's size, energy output, and stability. It was a daunting puzzle, but Laura focused on breaking it into smaller, manageable pieces. Across the chamber, Sylar moved with meticulous precision. His holographic displays filled with intricate equations and three-dimensional graphs, his calculations so complex that they drew murmurs of awe from the audience. He worked like a machine, his every motion deliberate and exact, as if he had rehearsed this scenario 100 times. Laura knew she couldn't outmatch Sylar in raw complexity. Instead, she leaned into what humanity excelled at: simplicity and efficiency. Rather than brute-forcing a solution, she focused on finding the path of least resistance, minimizing energy expenditure while accounting for the wormhole's erratic nature. It was a gamble, but Laura trusted the elegance of a straightforward approach. As the minutes ticked down, the tension in the chamber was almost tangible. Sylar was the first to finish. His solution, displayed in a shimmering projection, was a marvel of Roman engineering, a labyrinth of calculations and paths that accounted for every possible contingency. The audience buzzed with admiration, their whispers carrying an air of certainty about his victory. Laura took a steadying breath, her hands trembling slightly as she finalized her route. It wasn't as elaborate or visually stunning as Sylar's, but it was clean, efficient, and, she hoped, stable. She submitted her work and stepped back, her gaze fixed on the AI as it began evaluating both solutions. Evaluation in progress, the AI declared, its neutral tone heightening the tension. The room went utterly silent as the two routes were put to the test side by side. Sylar's route was analyzed first. The holographic projection displayed Sylar's ship entering the wormhole, its movements precisely following his intricate calculations. At first, it seemed flawless. The ship navigated hyperspace with precision, avoiding distortions and maintaining stability. But midway through the journey, the cracks began to show. A cascade of errors appeared as his overcompensated variables triggered a feedback loop, destabilizing the entire system. Moments later, the simulation ended with the ship collapsing into a virtual black hole. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Sylar's glow flickered faintly, a subtle sign of his shaken composure. Route unstable, the AI announced. Mission failed. Next, the AI began evaluating Laura's route. Her ship entered the wormhole, following the simple yet efficient path she had designed. The journey wasn't without turbulence. The ship encountered distortions and unstable currents, but her calculations allowed it to adapt in real time, harnessing the wormhole's energy flows to maintain balance. The ship emerged intact on the other side. Route stable, the AI declared. Mission successful. The chamber erupted with a mix of cheers and stunned silence. Laura stood motionless, her heart pounding as the realization sank in. She had done it. Against all odds, she had triumphed over Sylar. Sylar approached her, his expression unreadable. Laura prepared herself for a dismissive remark, but to her surprise, he extended a hand. His glow was dimmer than usual but steady. "Well played," he said quietly, his tone sincere. "Your approach was unexpected." Laura shook his hand, a faint smile playing at her lips. "Thanks. Your work was impressive too. Just a bit over-engineered." Sylar's glow flickered briefly, the Roman equivalent of a laugh. "Maybe there's more I can learn from you than I thought." As the audience began to disperse, Laura felt an immense weight lift from her shoulders. She had proven herself, not just to the Academy but to herself. Her rivalry with Sylar was far from over, but now it was rooted in mutual respect, a dynamic that promised to drive them both to new heights. As Laura left the simulation chamber, a sense of resolve settled over her. This victory wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a much larger journey. The galaxy was vast, filled with challenges and mysteries she was determined to conquer. By the time she returned to her dormitory, a modest room in one of the Academy's floating residential towers, the buzz around her victory had already spread. Messages flooded her holotab. Congratulations from some, inquiries about her methods from others, and a few thinly veiled attempts to undermine her achievement. Ignoring them all, Laura collapsed onto her bed, exhaustion and relief washing over her. For the first time since she had arrived, she felt like she truly belonged. Her success had proven something important, not just to the Academy but to herself. Humanity's so-called primitive methods weren't a liability, they were a strength. Laura's mind buzzed with the possibilities her recent success had unlocked, but exhaustion soon overtook her. She drifted into sleep, her dreams filled with swirling wormholes and glowing enromans. The next morning, she was startled by a knock at her door. Opening it, she found Siler standing in the hallway, his translucent form faintly glowing in the soft light. His expression was subdued, a stark contrast to the smug confidence he had exuded during their first encounter. "Good morning," he greeted, his tone carefully measured. "May I come in?" Caught off guard, Laura hesitated before stepping aside. Sure." Her dorm was sparsely furnished, with a few personal touches scattered among the standard-issue decor. Siler's gaze swept the room briefly before he turned back to her, his demeanor unusually serious. "I wanted to talk," he began. "About yesterday." Laura crossed her arms, leaning against the edge of her desk. "If this is about challenging me to another rematch, it's not," Siler interjected, holding up a hand. "I think I've had enough public humiliation for the week." His glow flickered faintly, a gesture Laura recognized as an Roman sign of self-deprecating humor. "Actually, I came to thank you." "Thank me?" Laura repeated, surprised. "For what?" "For giving me a new perspective," Siler admitted. "Your approach during the simulation, it was completely different from anything I've encountered. And it worked. That's not something I can ignore." Laura studied him, searching for any hint of insincerity. But his usual arrogance was absent, replaced by a genuine introspection. His glow had softened to a gentle shimmer. "Well," Laura said after a moment, "you weren't so bad yourself. A bit over-engineered, sure, but still impressive." Siler's glow brightened slightly, an Roman gesture Laura now recognized as akin to a smile. "Perhaps, but it's clear I still have a lot to learn." They spent the next hour discussing their approaches to the simulation. Laura explained how she had applied Earth's principle of minimizing energy expenditure, leveraging the wormhole's natural energy flows to stabilize her route. Siler, in turn, delved into the intricacies of his calculations, sharing insights that Laura found fascinating despite their complexity. By the end of their conversation, both had gained a deeper respect for each other's methods. News of their collaboration spread quickly through the academy. Within days, Laura found herself at the center of a growing curiosity. Students from various species began approaching her, intrigued by her human perspective on science and problem-solving. What had started as a rivalry was now evolving into something far greater, a bridge between different ways of thinking. Some remained skeptical, but many were intrigued, drawn to the elegance of Laura's intuitive, straightforward methods. Her success also caught the attention of the faculty. Professor Zarek, who had initially shown little interest in her abilities, extended an invitation for Laura to present her findings in a special lecture. The event drew a large audience, and as Laura stepped onto the stage, she felt a mix of anxiety and determination. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady despite the hundreds of eyes fixed on her. "Today, I'd like to focus on something often undervalued in advanced scientific circles: simplicity." She explained her approach to the simulation challenge, emphasizing the importance of stepping back to see the bigger picture and relying on fundamental principles. While her ideas initially met with a mix of curiosity and skepticism, by the end of her presentation, she had swayed even her harshest critics. Afterward, Professor Zarek approached her, his imposing form looming yet his tone warm. "Miss Brown," he said, his deep voice carrying an air of approval, "your insights are a welcome addition to this academy. I look forward to seeing what you accomplish." "Thank you, Professor," Laura replied, her voice tinged with both pride and relief. As Laura's reputation grew, so did her opportunities. She was invited to join a prestigious research team exploring practical applications of hyperspace mechanics. The team was composed of some of the brightest minds in the galaxy, including Siler. Their once tense rivalry had evolved into a productive partnership, their contrasting approaches complementing one another in unexpected and innovative ways. But Laura knew her journey was just beginning. The galaxy held endless mysteries, and her success at the academy had only opened the first door. She had proven humanity's potential, but she also understood how much more there was to learn and achieve. One evening, Laura stood on the academy's observation deck, gazing out at the vast expanse of stars stretching endlessly before her. The quiet hum of the station surrounded her as she reflected on how far she had come. Siler joined her, his translucent form glowing softly in the dim light. They stood in silence for a moment, sharing the view before he finally spoke. "You've made an impact," he said, his voice quiet, "not just for humans, but for all of us." Laura turned to him, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Maybe," she said, "but there's still so much left to prove." Siler's glow brightened slightly, his version of a smile. "Then we'd better get to work." As they they stood together, gazing out at the stars, Laura felt a renewed sense of determination. The challenges ahead were immense, but she knew she wouldn't face them alone. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer a question. It was a fact, and Laura Brown was ready to make the most of it.